What? You need to call your dad? I don't know how to break this to you, buddy, but you're in the world of Pokemon now. You no longer have a father. Hey, what's good, Joe? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. So this video is going to be a little more unorthodox, a little less scripted, because I saw something fun the other day, and I kind of wanted to try it. Apparently, there was a little conversation floating around YouTube and Twitter talking about one thing people would change to fix every mainline Sonic game. Like, you could only change one thing to fix the entirety of the game. For example, in Sonic Unleashed, I would make it so that the medal system isn't mandatory to progress through the game. For anybody that's actively played the PS3 or Xbox 360 version of Sonic Unleashed, you would probably know that that was that game's biggest hindrance. So, with the change like that in play, you could see how that could make it a much more enjoyable experience. And for any Sonic fans that are watching, don't argue with me about the werehog. I like the werehog. Get over it. So naturally, of course, my first thought immediately upon hearing about this was, yeah, I need to do this with Pokemon now. Of course, I would love to do this with other game series, probably on like Second Channel or something like that, but for now, we're gonna focus solely on Pokemon, obviously. I don't think I'm gonna keep you too long today, so why don't you go ahead, sit down, get cozy for a moment, maybe grab yourself a drink, maybe a nice cold ranch flavored Sprite, while we talk about all of the changes that I would make to each individual mainline series Pokemon game. And obviously, when I do talk about this, I'll be talking about the base game and possibly the remakes of these individual games, as there are times where they do present the exact same problems. So let's just talk about all of it. Starting with Generation 1. It's been a very long time since I've played anything related to Gen 1, obviously the most recent being either Fire Red and Leaf Green or potentially even Let's Go from what I remember. Which is why this felt the hardest, because I haven't played it in such a long time, and also it was like the beginning of the franchise, you know? So it's kind of hard to really nitpick when it was just the start. Like, they had so much potential to fix everything going forward, but they had to start somewhere, you know? Which is why the primary thing that I would most likely fix in any Gen 1 related game is the variety of Pokemon available, as well as the movesets. Again, Red, Blue, and Yellow, they can get a pass for that because they were literally the beginning, so I can't really get mad at that by any means. That's totally fine. But by the time we got around to the remakes, and especially Pokemon Let's Go, there was absolutely no excuse for the base game to not have access to a lot more Pokemon from other regions and things like that to shake up the variety a little bit. But again, not really angry about this one. I could be a little more lenient, especially with Fire Red and Leaf Green, especially because we got the National Dex. So technically speaking, we did have access post-game to all of these Pokemon, but it's just kind of lame that we didn't have access to all of these Pokemon until well after the game was finished, you know? Also, please don't hesitate to correct me if I'm remembering wrong on anything that I say here. It's been a good while since I've played it, and also every time I do play it, it's usually randomized, so, you know, Pokemon availability, completely lost on me when it comes to older generations sometimes, so my bad. But like I said, when it comes to remakes, Pokemon Let's Go had absolutely no excuse in its availability of Pokemon. Why were we playing a Generation 7 game with access to 151 Pokemon that there was no purpose for that. None. But overall, Generation 1, pretty lenient about. They've had remake after remake, and they've had reference after reference, even in the game that came afterwards. So, whatever. I'm not thinking too hard about changing too much in Generation 1, so that's fine. Generation 2, on the other hand, is insane to me. I completely understand why Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver as remakes of Generation 2 are a lot of people's favorites. It had the vibes, it had pretty good Pokemon variety, it had some of the best post-game because we got to go to an entirely different region, being the region prior, technically speaking, but, you know, it had a lot to offer. Even in the originals, we had a lot going on with that. And it's been a long time since I've played original Generation 2, but when it comes to Heart Gold, Soul Silver, I understand, I get it. I played enough of it to really understand why people love it so much, and I do myself enjoy it very, very much. However, upon many, many replays, it's made me realize that it possibly has the weakest story in the entire franchise. And this is including Generation 8, mind you. Team Rocket's back with no leader. That is the entire story. It is literally just Gold running around cleaning up residue. that is it. Never mind the fact that Silver is literally the son of Giovanni. Never mind the fact that Giovanni in an event was shown to still be roaming around doing God knows what. Never mind that we could have had a much more interesting and unique situation when it comes to Team Rocket maybe trying to utilize the powers of Lugia and Ho-Oh to take over the region. Never mind the fact that we had 3 legendary dogs that, to my memory, correct me if I'm wrong, did pretty much nothing throughout the entirety of the game but Aura Farm. Generation 2 easily had some of the most potential for like a perfect sequel when it comes to Generation 1, but like they didn't capitalize on that at all, and that is so baffling to me. So yeah, if it wasn't clear, I would put all of my focus into adding a real story into Generation 2. Like I said, it has a lot of great aspects about it. The music was absolutely serene, the aesthetics of all of the cities and towns were genuinely beautiful. It came together into a nice little package. It was just missing a story. That's it. Not that Pokemon has ever had the strongest stories of all time or anything like that, but we could put in a little bit more effort in this case. Come on. Now we move on to Generation 3. Another one that I haven't played in a good minute, if I'm completely honest. This applies to both original Gen 3 with Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, as well as Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. It has been genuinely a decade plus. Unlike IGN, I had no problem with the amount of water that was available in the original games or the remakes. I love the colors of it. I love the vibe of Hoenn. Overall, Generation 3 stuck with me pretty well for the most part. I feel like as a rival, Wally could have had a little bit more screen time and a little bit more, interesting development, but I feel like for the most part, they did okay with him. I think my biggest problem definitely had to be with Team Aqua and Magma, right? One wants to drown the world basically, and the other one wants to terraform the world in Soli Land. Their motivations barely make sense. I don't know if this was actually the case, but maybe they were trying to base a story around the abilities and aesthetics of Groudon and Kyogre, and that's why it turned out this way. I really don't know what the situation was there. I don't know. Maybe it would work out a little bit better if there was like one dedicated team as opposed to 2 separate teams going for opposite things that both don't make any sense. Right? Could have easily been a company thing in which the changing terrain and constant weather changes could have been manipulated by the CEO of a company or something like that, and utilizing that to maybe manipulate the masses and make it so that, they are constantly paying more to, switch out of their homes or go to different cities or towns because of it. I don't know. I just something different that isn't just either drown everybody or bury everyone. I just don't see the motivation or sense in either of these plans. Again, please don't hesitate to correct me if I'm wrong on what their motivations are and if they do make sense, but I'm just going based purely off of memory. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I'd organize that a little more, and that should probably be plenty, maybe. Next, we move on to Generation 4, my favorite of the generations. As much as I love Gen 4, it's not perfect by any means. It definitely has a lot of different flaws, but I still love it for what it is, and it is definitely the Pokemon game that I've played the most, probably. The region and its aesthetics were great. Its music was absolutely serene. I love the soundtrack for Generation 4. Character designs were pretty neat. Pokemon designs were pretty damn awesome. It gave me Shinx to Luxray, so can't really complain. I think that the biggest problem with Generation 4 though is definitely one of 2 things, and I can't decide which is the bigger issue. Firstly, and this is a problem even in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, the Pokemon variety. It's not really a coincidence that most people usually ended up with the same general team going through the entirety of the region. What do you mean most people had Infernape, Luxray, Garchomp, Staraptor on their team? What in the hell is that about? I mean, granted, great options, great Pokemon, minus Luxray, statistically speaking, but we should definitely have a little bit more interesting variety with that, no? In the original games, you only really had like 1 or 2 options of a fire-type Pokemon, obviously being either Infernape or I believe it was Rapidash, and other than that, you weren't really seeing a lot of fire-type Pokemon, which was extremely strange. And the problem wasn't even alleviated in Platinum or Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, especially Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, unless you were traversing the underground like a madman looking for a Houndour or a Camerupt or something of the sort. But it's like, guys, Come on, we couldn't diversify a little bit? Everybody's gonna have a freaking Weavile on their team if we're not careful about this. Come on. I don't know. I just always thought that it was so strange how everybody had like a very similar experience when going through Generation 4, and that's super weird. The second option I considered was upping the speed. Specifically in the original Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, BDSP can do whatever it wants, I guess, because it is more modern, so the experience bar isn't like as slow, but everything else in the originals felt like a slog when you really pay attention to it. Don't get me wrong, I still love it to hell and back, but in the originals, kind of hard to play without speed up nowadays. But maybe I'm just impatient, I don't know. Now that I've explained the two situations of Generation 4 out loud, I feel like I'd be leaning more towards putting a more prominent focus on making sure that there was a lot better Pokemon variety than anything. As I've said a million times by now, as you guys have heard me say a million times by now, one of my biggest problems with Pokemon in general is the fact that we are supposed to be having our own unique original experiences as Pokemon trainers, and in this situation it's definitely at its worst because we can't even really customize our characters and we're utilizing the exact same Pokemon team. We're going through the game the exact same way. That's crazy. Other than that though, Platinum for life, gang, baby. Moving on. Generation 5. This one's also really hard because I don't have any general, like, outstanding problems with Generation 5. I liked the region, the music was good, the story was easily probably the best of the mainline series. It had decently memorable characters and even gym leaders that all had something to do, so it's kind of hard for me to put down the biggest problem with it. Even in Black 2 and White 2, people definitely were getting on me when I was talking about the rival in that game. I guess I was talking crap or something, and everybody got on me, and you know what? If y'all were coming to defend him like that, he was significant enough, so my bad for disrespecting my boy. So I don't know, I really can't put a figure down on one specific problem. I don't know, at this point I guess I would probably just add side quests and maybe bring back stuff like contests and maybe the battle tower. But even with the battle tower not being a thing, at the very least we still had like tournaments. I don't know about Black 1 and White 1, but Black 2 and White 2 had the tournament situation going on, and that was really cool. So I don't really know. I don't have any massive outlying issues with Generation 5. That opinion could change on another dedicated sit-down playthrough of it because it's been a long time, but as of right now, I can't really think of much. Moving on to Generation 6. I have actually been replaying Generation 6 kind of recently for a video that I'm working on. I finally got my 3DS working so that I can replay through this game. Now, initially, I probably would have told you that my biggest issue was with the fact that you don't even get to any form of real story until a good couple of hours in, but I think now that I've been playing through it, my biggest problem would be the difficulty, and I would definitely want to change that. I am nuzlocking this game right now, and even with Pokemon that have like hindering stats or natures and things like that, despite their movesets, I have had generally no problem whatsoever. At the time of this recording, I'm not too terribly far into the playthrough. I've only gotten one gym badge. So what I'm thinking is I'm probably just gonna go ahead and turn off the experience share for the remainder of the gameplay and just see how that flows out. But even before the experience share, I was constantly switch training, and that's precisely what I'm gonna continue doing. So we'll see if that makes any form of a difference. Fun fact, I had literally forgotten you could turn off the experience share because I'm so used to it being permanent and mandatory that I forgot it was just an easy toggle in X and Y, which is crazy because that's when it was first introduced. But anyway, yeah, I think my primary change to Pokemon X and Y would be to make it a little bit more difficult. Nothing crazy. Going into Generation 7, this one was also hard because I'm pretty sure that this is the one that I am the least familiar with, because I've only played through Sun and Moon once and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon once, and never picked it back up again. Not because I had a bad time with them, mind you. I think the games were perfectly fine. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon technically being fine, quote unquote, because it was literally a repeat of the exact same game. But regardless, I simply feel like I'm not justified enough in trying to give a change when I'm not even all that familiar with the game because it's been so long. So I kind of did cheat on this and look to the internet to see what most people felt was the biggest problem with Generation 7. And apparently it was the amount of cutscenes. From what I remember, the story in Gen 7 was actually pretty good, so I personally don't have much of a problem with it, but maybe it's because of the amount of cutscenes that like the pacing was a little off, possibly. So if we're going based off of the internet, I guess my change would be to fix the pacing of the story. But if we're going based on my own personal request, I would probably just go to my fallback, which is essentially side quests and bringing back events that we had from previous generations, like contests and stuff like that. But we did kind of have a battle tower with the battle tree, so I can't really be too mad about that. But other than that, yeah, tournaments and events and stuff like that would be my move. Generation 8. This is probably the second easiest change that I would definitely make, because Generation 8, as much fun as I had with it, its biggest problem was the fact that it simply did not have a story. I'll give it this though. It definitely had more story and characters going on than Generation 2 could ever hope for. Sure, characters like Bede and Marnie weren't the strongest written and the most prominent within the story or anything like that, but hey, you know what? They had pretty great designs, they were fun enough to battle, and they were at least somewhat present doing their own thing throughout the course of the game. And even though Rose is probably the worst villain in the entirety of the franchise, yeah, he was there, he was around, I'll give him that. He's got more of a face and a name than the wannabe leader of Team Rocket from Generation 2 could ever hope for. But like we've said like a million times over by now, his motivations don't make any sense. All of the major plot relevant stuff is shoved to the ass end of the game because you are running around getting gym badges and doing nothing story related until you get to the tournament. Simple as that. The characters are completely undercooked, the only one having any real kind of somewhat development being Hop, and even then, I feel like they didn't lean into that as much as they possibly could have. Same situation with Marnie. Bede definitely could have used a little bit more screen time and development, but it is what it is. I think the biggest problem with Bede is that all of his happened like off screen. You know what I mean? It would have been nice for him to get taken under the wing of the fairy type gym leader and then constantly battle him every now and again to see where his motivations begin to lie, and then once we run into him at the tournament, he's a completely different person, you know? But whatever the case may be, yeah, my biggest change would definitely be to fix / add onto the existing story so that we have a more overarching plot throughout the playthrough. Cause there were some moments here and there that were like interesting and stuff like that, but again, it just never reached its full potential because all the important stuff was just completely shoved to the back, and that's not okay. And lastly, of course, Generation 9. It's so obvious what I'm gonna say. My biggest change would be to finish the game. If y'all have ever seen the Potential Man meme, it is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in a nutshell, and it's so infuriating. There's a lot of really interesting and good concepts that could have gone over well when it comes to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet if the game had more time to bake for another year or two. You cannot give us our first open world game and have it look like ass and have it be completely missing mechanics that were very obviously meant to be implemented. You cannot give us a major mainline title that takes major steps back from the game that released within the same year. Scarlet and Violet truly is baffling, and it is definitely one of those situations where you have to be super patient with it to really understand what it was trying to go for, to really truly appreciate it. And I've played the game enough times now to know that I do enjoy the game enough to, you know, constantly come back to it and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's not like I'm ignorant to its major flaws that definitely could have been alleviated and completely avoided altogether had it been developed for a little bit more time. This most recent update really goes to show that, you know, it's a much more bearable experience when the game actively functions the way it's meant to. So yeah, let's never do this again. But they probably will, because Pokemon Company likes money just a little bit too much, and Game Freak is on the receiving end of that. So Legends EA, save us, please. Break this curse, man. But with that being said, I think I've gone through all of the games. I don't really think I needed to mention Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I feel like that kind of just generally suffers from the same thing as Generation 3 overall, so that's fine. But yeah, for the most part, I think I got everything, right? Now, if I had to make one big, major, super overhaul to the entirety of the franchise, I would make better usage of the characters and the world. And I feel like just doing that could create more engaging stories and more fruitful playthroughs, and we could at least come out on the other side feeling satisfied, even if the game definitely takes a hit in the function department. If the stories are good, we will bear through it. I promise you that. And as you've heard me say before, that doesn't just apply to the games. I'm talking franchise, so that obviously applies to like the books, the manga, anime. I would just do that a little bit more and lean more into this world, lean more into its darker aspects, lean more into, you know, making characters and stories that revolve around certain characters, groups, or whatever, to make a more engaging world that feels a little bit more connected. There are so many aspects to Pokemon that are completely underutilized solely because this is a quote-unquote children's franchise, and so it is primarily geared towards children, when we could do a little bit of a balancing act and make it so that the people that grew up with the series are benefiting just as much from it as the younger audience. You know, call me biased or whatever, but I feel like people that have grown up with the series and supported it for a majority of their lives definitely should be rewarded, or at least acknowledged in some way, shape, or form with content that reflects that. Give me more interesting, morally gray characters. Give me stakes that actually matter to the fate of the planet, or at the very least to a group of characters. Give me a character to play that actively has their own story as opposed to the generic self-insert, you know? And if you are going to continuously give me the self-insert character, at least let me make my own decisions. Don't think that that's that insane to ask for, but apparently it is. But for the most part, that is how I would fix each individual game and the overall franchise in one go if I had to pick one thing to do. The Pokemon franchise could definitely use some touch-ups, and this is simply how I would go about doing that. And you don't have to agree with me, but I really do think that a lot of the changes here could make a major difference if every game went about it this way. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that actually just about does it for this one. This one was a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to do this for more games on second channel. I'll probably either do Sonic or Kingdom Hearts. We'll see what happens. But that's off topic and not even the place for that. So we're gonna go ahead and pass the mic over in your direction, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree that if we were to go about changing the games this way, it could really help the franchise? It could make really beneficial differences that would make it so that a lot of these games were a little bit more enjoyable, and it would just be a lot more fun in general if we did have these changes? Or are you on the opposing side? These are not the changes you would make personally. You don't think any of these changes would help or even make a lick of a difference, and you would go about it completely differently. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I'm always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, yes sir, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and do exactly so. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!